Okay, we're rolling.
Hey, welcome back to the How to Podcast series. It's Dave with you. Hope you're doing well. I'm going to talk about putting all your value up first in your podcast. Your episode titles. It's something that is hotly debated in podcasting. There's a lot of opinions. And I'm going to share a few of them with you, but I'm encouraging you to do what you want to do with your show. And don't be worried about doing something that someone tells you as a rule in podcasting, because there are no rules in podcasting, and whoever's telling you there is probably trying to sell you something like a course or a program or a coaching thing or $2,000 and you can be a certified podcaster. Yeah. They're trying to sell you something. So there are no rules. And anytime you hear somebody say, here's my rule for this, here's my rule for that, it's time to look for a new podcast. Maybe this one. And I'm glad you're here. We are going to be talking about the power of your episode titles. Some things maybe to consider, and maybe some things that, might work for your show, might not. But the only way you're going to know is by trying it. And I'm glad you're here. Let's jump into what we're going to talk about today. Thanks for being here. So when I listen to podcasts about podcasting and the topic of show titles comes up, it's very interesting. We talked about this at our meetup recently over at meetup.com. We get together with listeners of this show to talk about podcasting and help each other. And it's really, really fun. Probably the best podcasters you'll ever meet come to our meetups, and we're proud of that. And if you want to meet them and find out that you're not alone as a podcaster, we'd love to have you there. But we talked about episode titles in our meetup. We had a great conversation about this. And again, we walked away with a little bit more information, but as well permission to do whatever the heck we want with our show because it's our show. So a great episode title can be ignored if the title does not grab the attention in a crowded feed. Think about it. Your show is up against all of the other podcasts out there in the world. We say we don't have competition, but we do. There's only so much time in a day and a week to listen to podcasts. So you're up against everyone else who's also trying to get the attention of a listener. So you are competing just as much as people tell you you're not. You are in a very competitive space as a podcaster. And the title is often the difference between a scroll past and a tap to the play button. So why do titles matter so much? Well, here's something that's interesting. When you look at the popular, famous people who podcast, they don't have to follow any of these guidelines at all because they're popular. And people who try to copy them as a not as popular person, like me, I am not a Joe Rogan. When you look at Joe Rogan's titles, what does he have? The name of the guest. Dana Carvey, Mike Myers, whatever, John Bon Jovi. That's it. The name of the guest. He doesn't even write down what they talked about at all in the topic. There's no SEO beyond the name of the guest. And if you don't know who the guest is, maybe it's an author, a teacher, or somebody political. I'm not into politics. Somebody you're like, I don't even know who that is. And you'll just skip right by. It could be somebody like a movie star, but I've never seen their movies. I'm not interested. And if they put in what this person has done, what they've written, movie they've been in, the songs they've done, whatever, gives me a little bit more context to the conversation. Enough to get me curious enough to press play. But when you just do the Joe Rogan thing and put the name of your guest and that's it, you can do it because he's Joe Rogan. That doesn't mean it's going to work for you, and that doesn't mean it's a best practice for us as podcasters to emulate shows that come with fame attached to them already. Titles matter a lot in our podcasts. Podcast apps behave like a search engine. They're not the best search engine, but they do act like a search engine, and they surface episodes based on the words in your title, your show name, and your description. Strong titles help you to get discovered in Apple and Spotify and YouTube search. And they keep working long after the launch of the podcast episode as people binge through your back catalog. And a clear benefit-driven title also sets the listener's expectation of what's going to happen in the episode. It's something that catches the eye before we catch their ear, which builds trust in the episode. And what I'm hoping is that you deliver on the promise that you make in your episode title. So here's some stuff. Okay, so here I listen to many podcasts about podcasting, and one thing I heard one podcaster guru say is never put the guest name in your episode title. Now, okay, never is an absolute. Maybe consider not putting your guest name in the title, but when you say never, that's called gatekeeping. So let's just debunk this for a second. I have a podcast called Living the Next Chapter. It's an author podcast. I'm not an author, and I'm the host of the show. So the podcast is not about me. It's about my guest. I do it as a service to authors to help them promote their books. That's it. I don't make any money directly from the show. I don't have sponsorships. Nobody pays to come on my podcast as a guest. PR agents get paid by guests to get them on my show, but that money never makes it to me as the host of the podcast. So I don't make any money at all from it. The episodes are completely about my guest. Totally. They're about their book. They're about what they've been doing. It's about them. To not have the name of my guest in a podcast that features guests and is about my guests, not about me, would be ridiculous. And to the guru who tells me to never put my guest name in the podcast episode title, I tell you, I bid you adieu, because that's terrible advice. My show is built on my guest, whether you are a popular author or a first-time author. I can't imagine telling my guest, we're not going to put your name in the episode title because you're not famous. You're not Joe Rogan, so I'm not going to put you in there. What's the point of my show if I'm not going to accent and highlight and support my guests by including their name in the episode title? I'm trying to help my guests to be found online. I'm trying to help my guests with their own SEO by being on my show, and in turn, by helping them. They share it. They help me grow my show. So when I go to YouTube and I type in the name of my author guest, my show will show up with all the other places they've also been. I want that. And I want the name of my guest in the author title. Now, where do I put the name of my guest in the author title? For Living the Next Chapter, I put the name of the author guest at the beginning of the title. So if I wrote a book, which I haven't, it would be Dave Campbell, and then the name of my book, and then maybe something about what the book's about in the title. That's kind of my format for those show title episodes for Living the Next Chapter. Now, I also host Dad Space, which is a podcast for dads by dads. Now, not all of my guests that come on that show, it's not a lot of guests, but not all of my guests have anything to promote at all. They're just coming on to talk about their dad's story. So there's no reason to put their book or whatever. We just put more of the content, but I do include their name. I put it in the title because I want people to connect with them. The How to Podcast series, this show, I also have guest co-hosts. At the beginning, when I first started having guest co-hosts, you'll see the guest name is at the beginning of the title. I've been more recently putting it at the end of the title and trying to put the context of what we talked about up front. So it could be overcoming imposter syndrome with my guest co-host, Dave Campbell. See, I put it at the end. So their name is still in there, but we start with the value first. Now, I'm doing these things because I have the opportunity to do these across multiple different shows, and I get to play with what works and what doesn't work, and I get to experiment. You might have one podcast, which is great, and you can still experiment by trying to have your guest name at the beginning of the title, at the end of the title. It's all up to you. I would test and measure, and one more time, test, and measure. That's how you're going to know what resonates with your audience. Because my audience isn't your audience, and your audience isn't mine. So what works for me may or may not work for you. And when you buy into your favorite guru, you start to emulate what they do in hopes that it works for you, and sometimes it doesn't. And you paid a lot of money for that. So keep that in mind. Your mileage will vary. But for me, I like the name of my guest in my title. I have never released an episode that does not have the guest name in it, because my episodes are about the guest for a reason. And that's my approach. Now, like I said, this is not a rule. This is Dave's approach to how I do my podcast episodes. I've seen great feedback. I've seen great results, and I'm going to continue on this path. Despite all the gurus who tell me I'm doing it wrong, I'm here to tell you there is no wrong. It's whatever's right for you. Just keep that in mind. What about character limits? Like how many letters, spaces, commas, dashes, periods, semicolons, all that stuff. How many characters should I have in the title of my episode? Now, you got to think about how people interact with podcasts. So for a lot of people, they're listening on audio apps. So Audible, Spotify, Apple, fill in the blank, a ton of other places. So what I would encourage you to do is pull up any podcast on any app. And I'm just going to do this in real time. So I'm pulling up my Spotify because I listen on Spotify. Don't come at me. I love Spotify because it's got music, videos now. Hello. And it's got audio. It's got everything. So I love it. So when I scroll through here, I'm seeing the complete episode title for every podcast. I'm scrolling here. I see it all. I see nothing truncated, meaning like the word is cut off because there's too many words to display on the screen. Everything that I see fits. Perfect. I see the number sign and then the episode number. So pound, or you call it hashtag. And then, so hashtag 180, the habit most podcasters hate, for example. I see EP. So standing for episode. EP 19 dash how to build wealth with confidence / and the guest name. I see this one's definitely done by AI. Podcasting in 2025, that's an indicator. What actually mattered, and in brackets, and what matters next year. I see what is a passenger parent and an MI1 ? I like that. That's in a question format. That's good. I see how great hosts use storytelling to hook listeners instantly. No episode number. I see no episode number for this. Attract new podcast listeners on autopilot using this YouTube growth strategy. I see no number for this. It says 2025 being the year. Podcasting debrief : so this is done through AI. Insights and wisdom to guide your next year. I see $5.99 : 7 tips for upgrading your podcast content strategy in 2026. All lowercase because apparently this person doesn't know what uppercase is. I see how to handle low budget clients with grace. And then it has RD, short form for the name of the show, and the episode number. That's interesting. They have the episode number at the end. I see it just says 250 and then 6. No separation. So 256, 256 pro storytelling tricks that make your podcast more memorable. I see using AI to prepare your podcast interviews with a guest name. I see episode, all out, 49, 7 podcast growth trends for online entrepreneurs in 2026. I see episode EP 111, should you leave your pauses in your episodes, ? I see, does everyone need a home landline, ? Is St. John superior to St. John's, ? I see what most podcasts sound. This why most podcasts sound the same and how to fix yours. So yeah, there's a variety of different things I'm seeing here. Now, when we talk about episode numbers in your episode titles, should we have them, should we not? The advantage to having them, it's a simple point of reference for your audience when you talk about an episode that you want them to go check out. When you say, go look for episode 25, where we talk about blah, blah, blah. It's easier to find than giving them the entire title or the date and having them try to go through and vet all of your episodes. Living the Next Chapter has over 700 episodes. So good luck finding that without an episode number. So I always use episode numbers in my audio podcasts, but my approach is different for YouTube. YouTube, we have a character limit of 100 total. Letters and characters, spaces, all that stuff. So I want to use every ounce of my YouTube title, and I ignore the episode title on YouTube. I'm playing with this to see how it works. The episode title will show in the description of the podcast episode, but I ignore it in the YouTube version. I do that on purpose. I'm playing. I want to see what it looks like and how it works. One reason why episode titles are not encouraged are for your voice-activated devices. So I won't say the names in case it activates for you on your end, but those things that you talk to and they talk back to you. And you want the news, you want the weather, you want updates, whatever, or you want to add to your shopping list. Those things. In your kitchen, wherever, you know what I'm talking about. When we talk to them about podcast episodes, they get a little confused with a number at the beginning of the episode. They prefer those audio interactive tools, prefer to have the title without the number, which makes sense, right? It doesn't know what 365 and then the title of the episode is. That's confusing for those devices, and that makes sense. So I totally get reason why we wouldn't do it. And I'm telling you, there's no right way or wrong way. The one thing that an episode number in your title does do is it does reduce the amount of words that you could use about the episode, because the episode number takes up a number of characters. And the more episodes you have, the less characters you have for words about the episode. So I get that. I understand all that. But again, it's up to you. If you want to put the episode number at the end, if you want to put it at the beginning, if you don't want to have episode numbers at all, it's completely up to you. I would not do a few things in your episode titles. And here's a few considerations. And I'm saying this not because it's a rule, but just because it eats up a lot of your real estate in your episode titles, which you could be using for better things. Here's a few things just to think about. I've seen people who put the full name of their podcast in the episode title. So it's episode 32. So they'll have the full word episode instead of E or EP or just 32. They'll have the whole word episode. And then, so episode 32, and then they'll have the complete name of their show, the How to Podcast series. And then they'll have the title or the guest and the thing. And like, it's just super long. Now, when you look at your app, there's only so many characters that show up on your phone for each episode on the display on your phone. So I would say 6 to 10 words, about 60 to 70 characters is a kind of a safe zone for the total amount of characters that you want to have in the title of your episode. Remember that YouTube has a 100 character limit, and it just cuts it off after 100 characters, no matter what you do. Now, you're going to hear podcast gurus who are going to tell you that if you have, 4,000 characters you're allowed to have in your title, then you use all 4,000 characters, which is absurd. First of all, the podcast apps don't display a large number of characters, but at the same time, computers are searching for titles, searching for words. And the dangerous part is when people start cramming in words that are unrelated to the episode. They're trying to game the system to be found. So they'll take things out of the news and put it into the title just so that they'll show up in search. And it's not great practice because people click on it expecting you to serve the content you promised in the episode, and you don't. You're just leveraging popular search terms, throwing them in your episode title, and it doesn't land. And that's a bad experience, and you probably get punished for that practice. So stuffing your podcast episode title with as many characters as possible has been something that's been taught by gurus. I don't subscribe to that personally, but I do see the value in having good words that bring people to your episode. The best words possible will help people to find your show, and people will find your show, especially if you're on YouTube. Really a great way to be found. So I would encourage you to have great titles and think of your YouTube audience and think of your audio audience as almost two different groups of people as far as how they approach search. The better the titles, the better the results. And if you have multiple podcast episodes, when people come to your show and they're trying to decide on what episode to listen to, having something in there that helps them to identify the content that they resonate with will give you better retention, and more people will stick around because they don't feel completely lost in a sea of titles. So keep that in mind. Again, episode numbers are completely up to you. Keep in mind the length of your episode titles and the relevance. Make sure that it's really relevant to the person that's coming to you. That's all going to help you. SEO is a very popular term in marketing and also now in podcasting. Just think about SEO, search engine optimization is what it stands for, SEO. Think about it, what a new listener would type to search for you and your content. In our meetup, we have a doctor who comes to our meetup quite often, Dr. Zeist, and we talked about when she titles her podcast episode titles, does she title them for fellow doctors, or does she title them for lay people with no medical experience or knowledge? Because doctors can talk over our heads because they're so educated and super smart that I don't know what they're saying, and I don't know the terminology, I don't know the lingo. And for me as a non-medical person, I'm going to use very simple terms to search up for content about what I'm searching for. I'm not going to know all of the medical terminology around a surgery, a diagnosis, or medicine. I won't know those long words because I'm just new. I'm just looking with the basic information. So if your audience is people looking for help from a doctor with very little medical background, then using fancy $4 words, you're not going to get found because they don't know how to type those words in. They don't even know what those words mean. So you need to create episode titles. If you're trying to reach people that don't have medical training, you need to speak their language, not your language, and you need to adjust. If you're a doctor podcast talking to doctors, have at it, because the people that are searching for you and your content, they know exactly what you're talking about, and you don't need to make it easier to understand. You can just use the terms that work for you. So that comes back to knowing your audience. So search engine optimization is key. You're going to get a lot of it on YouTube. Again, I have people who find my show on YouTube and then come to my audio podcast after, but you want to be found. So you need some keywords in there. So let's go back to the Joe Rogan thing again, where he just puts the name of his guest. So if he had Dana Carvey on, and let's say Dana Carvey, the actor, has a new movie coming out, and the new movie is Dana Carvey's Christmas movie or something, then it would be Dana Carvey comes on to talk about Dana Carvey's new Christmas movie or something, right? Then it gives you some context to what's happening in the show. And all of those words, the context, are searchable words. So have the best words possible. Use one primary keyword phrase plus one or two supporting words that match with the search intent. You have to understand the intent of someone coming to a search engine to find you and your content. Why are they here? And then weave all this stuff into natural language so that the title still reads like something a human would say, not something that a computer would spit out. And avoid keyword stuffing. We talked about this. Once you have a clearly named the topic of the episode and the outcome, when you just throw in a bunch of extra words, it doesn't help. So keep that in mind. What about front-loading value in your title? As per the episode title for this episode, which is quite meta, I get this, front-loading value simply means putting the most important, searchable, and most compelling words at the very start of the title. Lead with the result, the problem, or the promise, and then add additional context, such as with guest name, or at the end, giving more details that give more clarity to what's happening in the episode. So, for example, write irresistible episode titles that get clicks is a stronger than episode 12, a conversation about podcast titles. See, episode 12, a conversation about podcast titles, doesn't tell you what the conversation was about. It's just that you talked about podcast titles. When you write something like write irresistible episode titles that get clicks, you're going to get clicks. That's what it does. That's how it works. Practical titling habits for new podcasters. Here's something to think about. I want you as a new podcaster, as you develop your titles for your episodes. This isn't the title of your show. These are the episodes you release, right? Okay. Treat your title like a mini headline, like a newspaper. You know, back in the day, those paper things that showed up at your door? Yeah, like a newspaper. Not an afterthought. Don't do this like the last thing you do before you shut your computer down. This should be something you think about and you put some planning into. Draft several options, read them out loud, and then choose the version that is both specific and easy to understand at a glance or heard. You're like, oh, I get it. That's what you want to go with. Skip your show name, episode numbers if you want. Emojis, please. Cut the emojis out. Come on. And internal codes like short form or acronyms, letters that represent words that people would not know, possibly, right? All that kind of stuff. And put your podcast titles in easy to understand, easy to say titles. It's going to help your podcast listeners to identify with what's happening in the episode, and they feel like they're in the right place. Remember that you only have so many characters available when you look at your phone for any of the apps that play podcasts. And YouTube has a 100 character limit at this point, at the time of recording. So you want to make sure you're 60 to 70 characters, up to 100 would be my suggestion. And anything over that is going to be extra and probably not seen by humans, but could be seen by computers. So if your goal is to be found by computers, then use as many words that are related to the topic that you're talking about on the show as possible. Good, relevant words, not just words for the sake of words. The value needs to be there for your audience. At the end of the day, titles are there to serve your audience. They're not there to serve you. They're there to serve the audience and make it easy. And my personal opinion, not a rule, is that when I have a guest on my show, my podcast is for my guest. I really want my guest to not just have a great time on the show, but I want it to serve them into the future. So the name of their book as an author, the name of their name as an author, whatever they're there to promote on the show, that's why I'm doing the show. So for me, it makes sense to have their name on the podcast. When I go on as a guest on your show and you don't put my name on the podcast title, it doesn't help my SEO. And less likely that I'm going to share it because it just looks like any other podcast episode. So having my name on your show helps me. And I hope that by me sharing your episode with my name on it helps you. And I think that's how we grow our podcast. If you have questions about your podcast episode titles and you would just like to get some feedback, anytime through my howtopodcast.ca website, there's a link right there on my page. It's a calendar link. And no matter what you want to talk about, episode titles or whatever, we can get together and have a virtual coffee together and chat. Happy to do that anytime. And if you need any more help with your titles or drafting and creating new titles for your podcast episodes, would love to help you. Keep me in mind, and let's reach out and have a time together. I'd really appreciate meeting you and talking about this show and how I can serve you better through howtopodcast.ca. Thanks for being here. Take care. Hey, thanks for being here to the end of the episode. That means a lot to me. It means a lot to all the players and all the apps. You're telling the apps, this is a podcast worth listening to. So you've just made this show better. So thank you. Now, I've had people reach out to me and they're like, Dave, I need to start a podcast and I'd love to start. But when I come to your show, there's a lot of episodes and I don't know where to start. How do I skip the line? How do I get to where I want to be without listening to over 500, 600 episodes? How do we make this happen? I love what you do, but I want to just get going. Well, I do offer consultations on podcasting and helping you and launching podcasts and coaching and mindset and everything, technology, interviewing techniques, whatever you can think of, I can help you with. And I have some paid offerings then to help you with that. So if you want to skip the line, great. You and I can work together. Let's figure out what you can afford. Let's figure out what we can do together. Always happy to help. Understand, though, this podcast is always going to be free. So you can bypass paying anything for anything because this show's always free. The meetups that we do, which is podcast consulting in a community setting, always free, twice a week. Over 2 years we've been doing it. There's always a free option. I'm not going to charge you to be here as a listener. But if you want to skip the line and kind of condense 500 plus episodes, then let's work together, you and I together. And I have some paid offerings. Reach out to me. We can talk about it. howtopodcast.ca. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to the end. I really appreciate you. And I appreciate you being part of this community. Always free, but always helpful. It's a How to Podcast series. Thanks for being here. Cheers. Okay, so you're still here. Great. A little bonus thing here at the end. We're trying to do this now that we're in the 500s and above. This is episode 542 already. Wow. Just wanted to talk quickly about the idea of sharing your podcast when you are a guest on a podcast. Do you need to share the show? No, you don't have to. And there's a lot of podcasters who go on as guests and never share. Do I require my guests to share? No, I don't. They've already given me their time. But if you do share your show when you're a guest on somebody's podcast, keep in mind that anything that you can do to point people back to that podcast will be helpful. I would suggest for you, if the podcast that you've been a guest on has a YouTube channel and releases the episode on YouTube, whether it's audio or video or both, that you jump into the comments. When you jump into the comments, when you're the guest on somebody else's show, then introduce yourself in the comments. Just jump in there and say, hey, it's Dave. I was the guest on this show. Happy to connect with anybody if anybody has any questions. And again, thank the host for having you on the show in the comments. But you start the ball rolling. Don't just sit there and watch for comments to begin. You start the party. Start the parade. And get in there and start talking on these episodes. It's a great signal to YouTube. Also like and share the episode as well through your email newsletters, Substack, however you communicate to your audience. Hey, I was a guest on this show. I like to do that. I always like to share. The other thing too is not only can you jump in the comments, but I create a playlist on YouTube of all the places I've been as a guest. And I put all the episodes in one playlist. Easy to find, easy to share. The other thing you can do is you can grab the transcript of the content of the episode. You can pull that information out and create your own clips. You can use that for that's you on the podcast. You're talking. You can share that information and use that for your own social platforms. So don't forget, you have the beginnings of a blog post. You can use it in different contexts, a LinkedIn article from your guesting experiences on other shows. Don't just be a guest and walk away. Be a guest and use that content for your own desires and for your own content, your own audience. It's a great way. And I always link back to the podcast where I was a guest to give credit to the host for all the hard work they've done to have me as a guest on the show. If you're looking for a guest for your podcast, reach out to me. I love being guests. Even if you have no interviews at all yet, you're a first-time guest podcast, and you don't even have any episodes yet, I'd love to be a guest. Reach out to me. Happy to help anytime. Thanks for being here. And keep podcasting.